The Nasdaq leads declines on Wall Street as the market remains cautious amid uncertainty over midterm election results and ahead of the release of the inflation data for October later today. Tesla slumps as Elon Musk sells stake while Facebook parent Meta lets go of 11,000 employees. It's a weak start to trade for stocks in the Asia Pacific. The SGX Nifty 2 signals a lower start for the Indian market. And cryptocurrencies crash for a second straight day. Bitcoin hits levels not seen since November of 2020 as popular crypto exchange FTX collapses. Binance backs out of the deal to rescue FTX, says the issues at FTX are beyond its control with almost $8 billion of emergency funding required. And it's a very weak quarter for Tata Motors. The company posts a loss of nearly 1,000 crores against expectations of a profit. The net debt rises to nearly 60,000 crores, while Jaguar Land Rover lowers margin guidance for FY23. Apollo Hospitals and Eicher Motor from the Nifty pack will release their second quarter earnings today. From the broader market, also watch out for numbers from SAIL, Bata and Ashok Leyland. Hi guys, good morning and welcome to Power Breakfast. I'm Pavitra Parekh. Those are the top headlines that we're looking at this morning. So clearly there is a lot to get to for the markets. We definitely got an extremely weak handover from Wall Street with cuts between 2 to 2.5% on the indices, and that is now reflecting in the kind of cuts that you're seeing in Asia. What's looking the weakest is the Hong Kong market. It's down over 2%, and a bunch of the selling has also come through in the past 20 minutes. So it has only slipped since the start of the session, and it's currently down 2.3%. The Taiwanese index also on your screen, that is down 0.7%. Across the board, you're seeing selling. So Japan is down almost 1%. But for Kospi, Straits and Taiwan, you're managing to, get away with not as much of a cut right now. So that is what is happening across the Asian markets. The SGX Nifty is also up on your screen. It is indicating a lower start for our own markets, but around 56 points lower is what we have on the SGX Nifty. So not as bad as what some of the other Asian markets are doing. With that, let's also talk about Wall Street. Then the US markets ended Thursday's trading session sharply lower as investors watched the midterm elections and looked at the prospects of a tight contest. The street also looked ahead to the October inflation print, which is due later today. So that is a key cue to track today. So the Dow Jones slipped over 600 points. So that was a big cut coming through, almost 2% gone there. The S&P 500 was down 2% as well. And the Nasdaq Composite was actually what looked the worst. It was down 2.5% at the close. CNBC's Bertha Coombs is here with a wrap of all of the action that played out on Wall Street.
Stocks falling on Wall Street after a Republican red wave failed to materialize in the midterm elections. Some investors had expected a strong GOP showing would make it easier for them to block new taxes and government spending. Meantime, adding to the negative move, Bitcoin hit a two-year low as the big crypto exchange's liquidity crisis shook the cryptocurrency market. At the close, Binance announcing that it would not sign a deal to take over embattled FTX assets after all. Meantime, a big loss for Dow component Walt Disney on disappointing earnings, helping to sink the Dow Industrials. They were down nearly 2% on the day. The S&P 500 was off a bit more than 2%, while the Nasdaq ended with a loss of 2.5%. Shares of Facebook parent company Meta bucking the trend, up about 5% on the day, though down 70% year to date. CEO Mark Zuckerberg making it official, cutting 11,000 jobs in order to cut costs. He apologized to those who will be impacted. The company's profits have been disappointing, even as he has spent billions to build an online metaverse. That's the action on Wall Street. Now back to you on Mumbai.
All right, Bertha, thanks a lot for getting us all of that action from the U.S. markets. But let's also bring you some important opinion on the U.S. From Allianz's Chief Economic Advisor, Mohamed El-Erian.
I think we have overcome interest rate risk and inflation risk. We've fully incorporated that. I think we are starting to understand credit risk, recession, etc. What we haven't got our arms around as a market is market functioning risk, liquidity risk. And that's the one thing I'd keep my eye on. I think that still has to play out as the Fed continues to march up with its interest rates. Look, I'd rather the Fed not be late. I'd rather the Fed not having to increase rates so quickly. But given that it's so late, I don't think they have a choice. I think the alternative of not reacting will be worse for the economy and will be worse for the markets long term.
All right, that is the word coming in from Mohammed El Arian. The other big story was what's going on with the cryptocurrencies as they extend their slide for a second straight day, and prices were pressured further after Binance, which is the largest global exchange by volume, abandoned plans to acquire FTX. So CNBC's Kate Rooney is here with all of the details and to take us through what's really going on.
Hi, Scott, that's right. So Binance's deal to buy FTX is officially off the table. We have a statement here from a Binance spokesperson. They say as a result of corporate due diligence, as well as the latest news reports regarding mishandled customer funds and alleged U.S. agency investigations, we have decided that we will not pursue the potential acquisition of FTX.com. They go on to say in the beginning, our hope was to be able to support FTX's customers to provide liquidity, but the issues are beyond our control or ability to help. It had been a non-binding letter of intent, but the deal not going through, according to that statement. Back to you. This raises a lot of questions for regulators. Investors I've been talking to in the past day or so have also poured some cold water on the idea that this would happen, and the questions of what happens if Binance doesn't go through this deal. Is it bankruptcy court for FTX? This is the international side of the business. What happens to those customer deposits? And then the legal liability. It's not clear that there's another backup option that's going to want to come in here based on what we're hearing from reports on their balance sheet and some of the questions that Binance had. Who would have a balance sheet big enough to come in and now bail out FTX based on what we know and have that risk appetite at this point to really want to buy those customer deposits on the cheap, but also inherit that liability that's going to come with it?
All right, so the Binance deal with FTX is officially off. Kay, thanks a lot for bringing us all of the details, but let's also hear out what Mohammed El Arian had to say on this entire stress that we're seeing play out in the crypto universe.
The good news is, unlike banks, they're not part of the payments and settlement system. So we don't have to worry about big systemic effects. The bad news is what we know so far is stunning. The amount of irresponsible leveraging that has been taken, the cross-ownership of assets. I mean, this sort of thing should not happen. And it raises two issues. One, will contagion go beyond crypto? And two, what will the regulators do? I don't think contagion will meaningfully go beyond crypto, but I do think the regulators are going to be playing massive catch-up because what they're seeing, I suspect, will keep them up at night.
All right, that is the word on the crypto markets as they stand now. But with that, let's move on and bring you all of the cues that you should track as we get into a brand new trading session. We have our entire research team joining in with the trade setup this morning. Vahishta, Vivek and Nigel join me now to take you guys through all of the stocks that you should track and all of the individual cues as well. Guys, a very good morning. And Vivek, let me come across to you first. We were just going through, what's happening globally, and that could really be what it's all about today.
Well, absolutely right. We are working with a very weak set of global cues, and that could weigh down on as far as the Indian markets are concerned as well. So all the news flow regarding, the U.S. midterm elections, as well as the very sharp sell-off that we've seen across the entire crypto universe, actually has led to most of the equity markets worldwide ending yesterday's session on with deep cuts. So most of the U.S. markets are lower between 1.8 to 2.4% lower, and along with that, even the European markets, on the back of the contagion effect, actually saw quite a bit of a sell-off yesterday as well. When you're talking about gold prices also dipped lower yesterday, down almost 0.5%, and crude prices also yesterday, on the back of higher than expected build-up as far as inventories were concerned in the US, also saw quite a bit of a sell-off. When you're talking about WTI futures, down almost 3%, Brent futures down almost 2.8% in yesterday's trading session. Coming closer home, corporate earnings continue as far as the corporate India is concerned, and some of the key results today to keep an eye out for is Eicher Motors, JSPL, Ashok Leyland, Container Corporation. You're also seeing SAIL as well as Zomato, that will be declaring their Q2 results today. The IPO market also is quite active with quite a few issues that are still open for subscription. When you're talking about Asian markets, most of the Asian markets have followed the global peers trading in the red, and the SGX Nifty 2 is indicating a gap down opening for our own markets.
All right, Vivek, thanks a lot for getting us all of those cues. It is around a 40-point downtick on the SGX Nifty, so let's see how we move from there. But let's also bring Vahishta in, who has the entire list of stocks that we should be tracking. Vahishta, I'm guessing you're going to start with Tata Motors for its big shocker.
That's right, Pavitra. It is a big shocker. Disappointing set of numbers coming in. Missed the street estimates by a high margin. EBITDA has come in at 5,500 crores versus the estimates which were much higher at 8,300 crores. The bottom line has a loss of 945 crores. Though the losses have contracted, but the expectations were a profit of 248 crores. So definitely disappointing for Tata Motors. Moving on to Star Health and Allied Insurance for Q2 of FY23, the gross written premium is up 11%, while the incurred claims are down by 8%. Pidilite, again, weaker than expectations. The margins have come in marginally lower to 16.6% versus the poll, which was higher at 17.5%. Deepak Nitrite, another weak quarter for the company. Operating margins have literally nosedived to 13.8% versus 23%, and the last stock is Galaxy Surfactants. Revenue up 40%, so good, come in at 1,200 crores. Operating margins have also improved to 10.7% versus 8.7%.
All right, Vahishta, thanks a lot for filling us in with all of those stock-specific details. Finally, let me hand it over to Nigel, who's looking at all of the cues from the futures and options market. Nigel.
Well, morning. Yesterday the FIs, they bought a smaller quantum. In the last many trading sessions, this is the smallest actually buy number that we got. And importantly, you look at the institutional number, that's the DI and the FI number together. Well, institutions were net sellers. On the index futures side, well, they added some long positions yesterday, and there were some mild shorts that did get covered as well. That doesn't take away from the fact that they continue to remain net long on the index, with close to around 58% of their positions on the long side. Now, on the option side, well, they were buying calls as well as puts. But for me, what's telling me is that the bears are going to be putting a fight at around that 18,300, 18,350 is the way they wrote calls yesterday. Massive call writing is what we saw. Close to around 11 calls were written for every one put, telling you that at higher levels, there is going to be supply and there's going to be a fight that's going to come in. And what were they writing yesterday? The 18,200, 18,300 calls, well, both of them very active. In fact, between the two, close to around 90 lakh shares were added. So aggressive writing is what we saw out there, close to 95 lakh shares out there. Now, the buy on dips thesis, that will be tested today. Remember, we have expiry as well that will play out. That's the weekly expiry. So that could be actually a blessing in disguise, because you're going to have a bit of a weak session. Then you could get some support coming in at lower levels. The 18,000 put, that has a highest open interest. So expecting that level to hold down. And there'll be crucial support at around that 17,950. I say this because a few sessions ago, we went to around that 17,960 odd. And from there, we saw a bit of a bounce. SGX Nifty suggesting a bit of a downtake. Keep in mind, yesterday in the final hour of trade, we did see a 50-60 point downtake. So that's why the SGX Nifty is not suggesting such a deep gash. Maybe some part of that weakness that we got overnight was factored in yesterday's session itself. So 50 point downtake. Let's see what happens from there. Back to you.
All right, let's see what happens after that lower start that we do get. Nigel, Vivek, Vahishta, thanks a lot for joining us and taking us through the trade setup this morning. But with that, it's time for our first short break on the show. When we come back, we'll talk about Tata Motors after it reports a very weak set of Q2 earnings. So all of the details after this short break. Welcome back. You're still tuned into Power Breakfast, and let's talk about some of the individual stocks which could be in focus today. The big one is going to be automaker Tata Motors after it reported a very weak set of second quarter earnings. So Sonia is here with the details. Sonia, good morning. What really went wrong for the company?
So, if you look at it on a year-on-year basis, right, the losses for the company have narrowed, but it was expected to be a much better quarter. So, compared to estimates, the numbers were much below, and I think that's where the disappointment stems from. It's a net loss of about 940 crores. The poll was suggesting a profit of somewhere around 250 odd crores. Even on the EBITDA front, overall, the consensus EBITDA was expected to be about 8,300 crores. It came in at 5,572 crores. Now, if you just look at the JLR numbers, right, the EBITDA margin at 10.3% is a fall of 230 basis points compared to what we saw last quarter. Not just that, JLR has also reported a negative free cash flow of 15 million pounds because of the adverse working capital movement. Now, if you just look at the core numbers, the consolidated numbers, they don't look that bad year on year because of the low base of last year. So revenues are up about 30-odd%, EBITDA up 35%, the margins improved to 7% versus 6.6%, and the net loss is much lower than what we saw same time last year. But it's not comparable because same time last year you had severe semiconductor shortages because of which production itself was on the lower side. The big concern for me is the rise in net debt for Tata Motors. So this time around the net debt has almost ballooned to 60,000 crores compared to 48,700 crores at the end of FY22. And the management says that this is because of working capital deterioration as well as weak profitability that hurt the cash flow at JLR. They also sound a bit cautiously optimistic in their tone when they say that the demand is strong, but the global challenges make it a bit of a monitorable, so they are not quite sure whether this demand can sustain. JLR has an order backlog of 205,000 units, and they're expecting to see an improvement in the second half of the year as the chip supply improves. Now, one more reason why the stock could be under pressure is because JLR has lowered its guidance for the full year because of the global challenges. They now say that the EBIT margin will be positive, but earlier they had said that they'll do a 5% EBIT margin. That's what they said in Q1. But now they're just giving a blanket statement saying that it will be positive. Also, they're expecting a free cash flow break-even in FY23. Back to you.
All right, so Anya, thanks a lot for taking us through all of the numbers as well as what the management is saying now. So that is going to be an important stock to track this morning. But with that, let's shift focus to the other space. We're looking at banking, and the Government of India, under the specified undertaking of the Unit Trust of India, or the SUUTI, is slated to divest all of its 1.55% stake in Axis Bank. Abhishek joins us with more on this. Abhishek.
Well, as you mentioned, government will sell its 4.65 crore shares in Axis Bank. That translates to about 1.55% stake in the bank. The floor price has been set at 830.63 per share, which is a discount of about 5% from yesterday's closing price. So nearly at all-time high is the stock price of Axis Bank. So it's a clean-out trade from Suti, given the fact that they hold only 1.55% stake. Just to alert our viewers, on 1st of November, Bain Capital had sold about 1.24% stake in the bank. They now hold about 3% residual stake that they have in the bank, and there is a 90-day lock-in period, for Bain Capital to, inaugurate its next sale. Back to you.
All right, Abhishek, thanks a lot for getting us all of the details there. But with that, it's time for another short break on the show. When we come back, we're going to shift focus and track what's going on in the commodity markets. So stay tuned for all of that action. Welcome back. You're still tuned into Power Breakfast. And as promised, let's talk about the commodity space now. Manisha joins us with an update. Manisha, good morning. What's going on?
Well, I'm looking at the crude oil prices where we have seen a fourth straight day of decline come in today as well. It really seems like a contagion right now because the decline has just about continued. If you look at overall, if you look at the inventories in U.S., those have continued to gain up. Markets also are looking at the U.S. production, which is at 12.1 million barrels per day. But it is Chinese demand which continues to see a decline, and is the reason you have seen a profit taking coming in. Also because Brent has increased the margin to trade crude oil now by 5%. That also has led to some people getting out of the market here. But the strength has really continued in case of metals. You have gold, which is still trading above $1,700 per ounce. Steel prices have rebounded from 2.5-year lows. Iron ore prices have gained up by 12% in the month of November, and most of the metal prices also trading in the positive ahead of the U.S. inflation data today.
All right, Manisha, thanks a lot for getting us all of those updates on the crude prices as well as what's going on with gold. But with that, let's move on and also bring you an update on the midterm elections in the United States. Results from the midterm elections are still rolling in, and it looks like the Republican red wave is not panning out as expected. NBC's Kristen Welker is here with the latest.
24 hours after ballots were cast, control of Congress is still up for grabs. President Biden insisting it was a good night for Democrats.
While the press and the pundits are predicting a giant red wave, it didn't happen.
Republicans who had been hoping to take the House in a red wave, now just looking for a win. The GOP still favored to take over, but with a smaller margin than expected.
We will be in the majority, and Nancy Pelosi will be in the minority.
Much more suspense in the Senate, where Republicans still could gain the one seat they need to take control. But Democrats could hang on too, with NBC News projecting races that are too early to call in Nevada and in Arizona. And in Georgia, the showdown between Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock and Republican Herschel Walker. NBC News now projects will go to a runoff.
we always knew that this race would be close.
I'm like Ricky Bobby. I don't come to lose.
Democrats' biggest win of the night coming in the critical Pennsylvania Senate race. Democrat John Fetterman, 6 months after suffering a stroke, defeating Republican Dr. Mehmet Oz.
We did what we needed to do.
Republicans with big victories too, including Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, easily defeating Democrat Stacey Abrams. And in the biggest win of the night, Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis winning re-election in a 19-point landslide, sweeping virtually every county in the state, including heavily Latino Miami-Dade.
We reject woke ideology. We will never, ever surrender to the woke mob. Florida is where woke goes to die.
DeSantis seen as a possible 2024 presidential contender where he could face former President Trump, who had a tough night. His endorsed candidates in Ohio and North Carolina won, but several of Mr. Trump's other handpicked candidates in key races, including New Hampshire, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, all lost. Meanwhile, President Biden was asked what he will do differently, with most Americans saying they're dissatisfied with the state of the country.
Nothing, because they're just finding out what we're doing. The more they know about what we're doing, the more support there is.
And we pressed him about running again.
2/3 of Americans in exit polls say that they don't think you should run for re-election. What is your message to them, and how does that factor into your final decision about whether or not to run for re-election?
It doesn't.
What's your message to them? To those 2/3 of Americans?
Watch me.
All right, that is the latest on the U.S. midterm elections. Of course, we're tracking that closely and we'll keep bringing you updates on it through the day as well. But with that, we're out of time on this edition of Power Breakfast. The Asian markets are all lower, led by cuts seen in Hong Kong. The SGX Nifty down around 80 points as we speak. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Bazaar Morning Call is up next.